the development of Islamic jurisprudence, obviously in the time of the Medinite Caliphate, when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, decisions were made essentially by him. He was alive. The Qur'an was being revealed at the time. The Muslim community at this time obviously was very, very small. So this was possible at that time. Following that, in the time of the first four caliphs, the four, as they're known in Islam, the rightly guided caliphs, again, judicial decisions were often taken by the caliphs themselves. And the sources that they used, obviously, these were people that had already been alive in the time of the Prophet. So they, were direct sources of the Sunnah, or the practice of the Prophet, and were very well versed in the Quran. So those, at the time, those were the two primary sources that were being used for dispute resolution. It's important to remember, in this sense, again, the size of the community and the geographic limits of the Muslim community at this time. It was mostly at this time limited to Arabia and to the tribes that initially accepted Islam. So the demands of justice essentially were defined by the size of the community and the people that were in leadership of the community at that time. The biggest change obviously happens from this small communities during the Umayyad Caliphate and then later in the Abbasid Caliphate, when the Muslim community expands from a very small community limited to Arabia to a huge empire. And suddenly the demands of administering an empire make it necessary for there to be a judicial system that can fulfill the demands of justice. The fact, obviously, and then there is the temporal proximity is lost. Obviously, the Prophet, peace be upon him, passes away, the caliphs pass away, and increasingly, there is distance, historical distance from the original sources. And this is when, essentially the schools of thought, the four Sunni madhabs that are the basis of Islamic jurisprudence even today, begin to develop, and the administrative functions of dispute resolution begin to develop. So, these are kind of this is a crucial jump in the development of Islamic jurisprudence. It's at this time where, the necessity, for example, of human sources is recognized, because, there's the Quran and the Sunnah, but the number of problems that arise from a huge empire, from a huge diversity of people that are now no longer Arab tribes, but also people in in what is now Iraq, what is now Persia, are all now part of the large Muslim community and need that direction. So this is how kind of, Islamic jurisprudence as a science begins to develop and continues to develop. The classical age of Muslim jurisprudence was the age in which, literally thousands of texts on Islamic law were written. There was incredible diversity and plurality of thought, in this classical age. So if there are two kind of crucial historical epochs to remember, or maybe I guess three, it's that, there was the original Medinite Caliphate and the demands of that community. And then there was that huge expansion within, within the Muslim community, which ultimately goes on up to the classical age of Islam. And then the third huge kind of historical epoch to remember within the development of Islamic jurisprudence is the end of the Caliphate in 1924, and which kind of essentially was, came about by colonialism. And colonialism, in this sense, had a devastating impact on the development of Islamic jurisprudence. Prior to that, the jurists in Islam, the people who understood law, who applied the fiqh sciences, essentially formed a very powerful class that served essentially as a check on executive power. They were, in that sense, provided this function where, the ruler could not just do what the ruler wanted to do. The juristic class in this sense was independent, was crucial, and was a very performed a very specific checking or accountability function on executive power. Unfortunately, this ends to a large extent with colonialism, when with the incursion of Western powers into what were Muslim lands, at the end of the caliphate, the intellectual richness, the diversity of Islamic jurisprudence essentially begins to stagnate, because various parts of the Islamic world decide to go to support just purely Western form of jurisprudence. Secularism comes in, which is a different concept of understanding legality. I mean, one of the central concepts, obviously, of Sharia is that it has a transcendent component, right? I mean, the decision that you do, what you're doing as part of a Sharia directive, has implications both in your life here, as well as your metaphysical beliefs and your transcendent life after death.
Support for Voices and Visions comes from the Social Science Research Council, the SSRC, leading innovation in the social sciences and educating the next generation of social science researchers.